Shardpunk Verminfall. I would very quickly summarize this game as XCOM, but Darkest Dungeon and FTL. At its core, it's a turn-based tactics game with some roguelike mechanics alongside level progression and survival mechanics I would compare to FTL and Darkest Dungeon respectively. Right off the bat, the font that's used feels incredibly abrasive, it's hard to read and focus on. I feel like I get a headache just from reading the font, specifically the white text. The orange text seems to be less nausea-inducing. Menus also lack clear UI. Example, character selection. Didn't tell me to double click to add party members, so I spent I don't know if I would say a few minutes, but I spent at least a minute trying to left click on a character, left click on the slot, right click on characters, drag, things like that. Eventually, you get to a point where you figure it out and you move forward. Lesson learned. However, while some of the UI elements are lacking, I do appreciate there being a very obvious save and exit button. I've seen a lot of games that obscure how and when it saves and if I should just be exiting the game, so getting the peace of mind that I'm not losing my progress is good. The music is repetitive and feels a bit overbearing at times. Guns are also very loud relative to the game, and unfortunately there are no separate audio sliders. There's just one for music and one for sound. Overall, the sound effects are subpar, but they do match my expectations for a game at this price. The tutorial after the initial UI character selection regarding combat is very good at explaining the base level game mechanics. I also really appreciate the codex. It's very detailed, and the game is clear to inform you of what you need to read in the codex and what you can skip. This makes the initial learning curve less intimidating when first jumping in, though you will get quite a few codex notifications popping up as you play through your first run. Combat is fine. It plays very much like any recent isometric 2D tactics game. The enemy variation isn't crazy, but it is enough to make sure there are always new things coming during a run. Much like many tactics games, I feel like this game suffers from the in-forward approach that typically slows gameplay down, especially when trying to loot around the map to make sure you have enough resources going forward. If you want to move forward without dying, you need to often move one space into Overwatch All. You also have to be very careful when using melee characters so you don't trigger additional enemies, or, from my experience even more importantly, certain timed events that you aren't in a position to get to. The aesthetic of the game is simple but effective and has a nice charm to it. With the above, it may sound like I haven't really enjoyed my time with the game, however, it is quite the opposite. The gameplay is very enjoyable, even if aspects of it may not be as polished as they would hopefully be. So far, the somewhat tropey story is also very enjoyable, even if it's nothing wholly unique. Given with that, the caveat, I haven't completed a run yet. I continue to die, and I'm not sure what the narrative looks like after completing those, if it develops more, or if it's just something that's very surface level, in much the way I would say FTL is to cater to the mechanics of the game. At the core, this game is a good idea wrapped in UI issues, a few odd choices, and what is likely budgetary limits. Overall, I really enjoy the game, but find that the issues with the text are the biggest blocker to me being able to really say that I fell in love with this game. I'd love to see what, if anything, comes next from the person behind this game, as it appears to largely have been a one-person effort. Please leave any thoughts you have down below, and if you'd like to see more, I'd love to have you subscribe.